The Fox News political insiders are here. John LeBoutillier, Pat Caddell, and Doug Schoen. Gentlemen, good to see you tonight.
To see you.
I want to get your ideas about what happens next with this confirmation for Sylvia Burwell.
Well, I know Sylvia quite well, worked with her in the Clinton administration, Harris. She is, as was reported, a first-class woman with bipartisan support. To answer your question specifically, the Republicans should and arguably need to use the hearings to get to the bottom of what the numbers mean, what the 7.5 million signups mean in terms of demographics, and most importantly, how many have paid. She needs to really offer specific solutions to fixing Obamacare in terms of coverage and premiums. The Republicans need to use this as the base to show that they're constructive on health care, not just using it to go negative for a political reason, given the elections in the fall.
Pat Caddell, what happens next?
Well, I think Doug summed it up. I think, well, one thing is Sebelius is not going to be a vice president for anybody.
For sure.
For anybody, for sure. It took him forever to get rid of her. This declaring victory. When George Akins said that in Vietnam, we should declare victory and get out, which was not a bad strategy for Vietnam. Unfortunately, the Obama administration declared victory, but this never ends. It just keeps going on and on. The hearings will display that. I don't care how good this woman is. This is about the bill. This is a question of the Republicans can sound like they have a constructive policy. And whether they can take like these phony numbers, these phony promises, and what's coming next has been put off because of the election, so the people already know,
John, I'm curious to know if this is in fact part of a political play for the Democrats to kind of turn the corner. You heard the president say last week that, the first quarter's behind us. I'm paraphrasing him, and now we move forward. And I guess part of that was then Sebelius's exit. But does this help them turn the corner?
Well, among their own supporters, maybe it does. But among the public, among independent voters, it does not help them. And by the way, on the hearings on Ms. Burwell, the Republicans need to do everything Doug and Pat said, but the tone of how they do it is crucial. If they get all in her face, all accusatory, all rough, they're going to hurt themselves.
How so? I mean,
because
you can't
they're
ask
going to look
tough
like
questions?
You can ask tough questions, but I saw a clip the other day of Senator Sessions interviewing somebody, and he was like Perry Mason, Yes or no? Yes or no? I want a yes or no.
You're not saying that if she's a woman, right? Because, if you're in that position, you guys ask me tough questions all the time. You put me.
You ask the questions.
The Republicans have negatives over 50%. They're seen as too shrill and too harsh. But they have the advantage on the issue. What they lack is a program and a policy going forward.
Well, what they need to express, I think, is in terms of opposition. It's not attacking her, but going on about how could we have this? How could you change the law? How could you just rewrite the law constantly? How did we get here? Why did nobody read the bill? The kinds of questions of sadness rather than anger. And understand one thing. The Pew poll last week, which is hardly described as a right-wing polling operation, came out with a poll showing that people are opposed to Obamacare. It's a big surprise. They are intensely opposed, and they're motivated to vote. That's what the problem is.
And I call that, Pat, the passion differential. And going into this year, the passion, Harris, is against Obamacare. That poll that Pat cites, 58% of people disapprove of Obamacare. 58%. And of them, 80% say they're going to vote expressly against Democrats because of Obamacare. So there's the passion. And that's why the president isn't talking Obamacare now. He's talking, right, Doug? Minimum wage, equal pay for women. They want to get off this thing.
Is the war on women, a minimum wage combined with unemployment insurance, fairness, in other words.
The way you describe it, though, and I'm pushing back a little bit because I'm trying to kind of get to the nugget of when are you allowed to ask tough questions, no matter who's in charge, no matter which party.
You ask us. You're nice when you ask. I get reactions.
They don't see our green room conversations.
Oh, that Harris is so nice. Do you ever hear people describe Republicans as nice anymore? They used to say it of the Reagan era. They're nice. No, now they're mean. They got a chip on their shoulder. They're sneering. That's a bad image, and that's the image they have.
Well, according to Pat, people should be angry.
Well, what they are, this should be used to do is to take this law apart, piece by piece by piece and how it's been handled. And by the way, it's a Chinese water test. It's like pulling, I'm sorry to use this expression, pulling the wings off a fly.
Oh.
It is not taking a hammer to her.
Yeah.
I give you the
Interesting,
perfect example.
okay.
The perfect example of a congressman not knowing how to ask questions and behave on TV as at a hearing is Darrell Issa. Every time you see him, his behavior goes against what he's trying to accomplish.
Let me offer a slightly different explanation. The swing voters are independents now who are hostile to the Democrats, but they want practical alternatives. They're not looking for just attacks. How do we fix it? So far, the Republicans have yet to offer answers.
All right, I want to talk about the other story that topped our news, and we are awaiting an emergency meeting at the United Nations on Ukraine and the Russian crisis. And it's interesting that Russia, again, has taken the lead somehow. I mean, the Ukrainian leadership is threatening pro-Russian forces in Ukraine to get out by tomorrow morning.
Right.
And then Russia asks for a meeting at the UN, an emergency meeting, and again, taking the lead in a situation that the world is waiting to see what will happen.
The Russian position is that the Ukrainian military has now threatened the interests of Russians in eastern Ukraine. And what Vladimir Putin has said very clearly and unabashedly is that if Russian interests are threatened, he will use every power within his means to protect them. Put another way, I think, Harris, this is a pretext for a full Russian invasion of eastern Ukraine, as we have been talking about for the last month or so.
And which means that Putin has calculated, Vladimir Putin, can go take part of the Ukraine, and whatever retribution is coming from President Obama, Angela Merkel, Cameron, I can handle any of it. They haven't scared me off of this.
Well, look, let me just come at this a little different angle. We saw this week the Iranian ambassador, the Iranians wanted to send someone that was involved in the hostage crisis, seizing people. And we finally, after 100 senators said no, the administration said no, the visa. The real question was, and I didn't hear this on Stephanopoulos talking to Samantha Power's Day, the real question was, why? What were the Iranians sending? Why would they even do this? And the reason why was to put it in our face that they can get away with everything. That's what Putin is doing. Putin is, as I've said, taken the measure of Barack Obama and found his Neville Chamberlain. The failure of the president to speak out on any of this, the failure to help arm the Ukrainians, the failure to lead. This non-leading is unbelievable. They are surrendering the world.
Pat, they did send some meals in there.
I want to make it clear on Iran, because that's an interesting point that you're making. So they were going to send this ambassador over. The United States said no, but you said 100 senators it took before the White House would listen. And just to paint the picture, in the 79 hostage crisis, this person would have been a student, I believe a computer expert, that was part of that uprising that took our people.
But don't worry, Harris, the Iranians say he was just a translator.
Right. He was just, no, the answer is they went to send a message to us, which is, by the way, we're going to build a nuclear weapon anyway, and it was like this.
Yeah, I'm wondering what that does for the nuclear deal.
It was, well, what it tells you is what we all know, which is the nuclear deal is a fraud. They are going to get a nuclear weapon. This administration is so desperate to look like they've made an agreement with anybody, Syria, Iran,
and the Russians
whatever.
have basically said they will undermine the nuclear talks if we don't do their bidding on Ukraine.
It's interesting how you play these two countries at the same time. Before we go to a quick commercial break here, I have to ask, what can President Obama do with the situation in Russia and Ukraine right now? I mean, it looks like we're on the verge of something. I don't know what it is, but it's ugly.
No. He could have done already. He should have done
But now going forward, what do we do?
Well, even now, we can quickly get some unity on some economic sanctions. Military aid to the government of Ukraine.
Missile defense, make it clear that we are going to tighten sanctions, which have been porous and not expansive enough. We haven't really done much of anything yet.
We're sending Vice President Joe Biden on April 22nd. Last 15 seconds, Pat.
On the 22nd, that's next week. Next week instead of tomorrow. We're sending him next week, and we're saying the vice president. This president doesn't know how to lead, and people are going to take it as a joke.
All right. The federal government backing off its operation to seize a Nevada rancher's cattle. Armed agents met with angry protesters yesterday. It ended peacefully, thankfully. But this battle isn't over yet. Boy, we did not know how this was going to end yesterday. I want to share some tweets now at Harris Faulkner. Wild it, I think is how you say it. Yes, we care. This is a government overreach. The government owns 86% of Nevada, ? We the people own it. Doug?
Well, absolutely right. This is a classic reaction against government overreaching. We talk every week about anger, and there's no more anger in America than about the encroachment of the federal government. April 15th is coming up. Tax Day inspired the Tea Party, which was initially bipartisan. Harris, there is a lot of spontaneous anger in America. This could be the first spark.
All right, 2 bits of fact here. The Bundy family, Cliven Bundy is the rancher. His family says they've been letting their cattle graze on that land since the 1800s. The federal government says it's public land. They're trying to protect a tortoise type there that lives there on that land, and they say that this rancher owes $1.1 million to the government. Pat?
Well, I mean, the people have been grazing on these public lands since the 1800s. This is back to cattle, sheep, whatever. But look, whatever those incidents are, the government's coming down on people, whether, it was a disaster at Ruby Ridge or whatever. People don't like it. But right now, we've got, Gallup shows the highest percentage ever of people saying that the threat in their lives is big government as opposed to big business or big labor. And what we see is the IRS scandal, the corruption of that, whether it's Benghazi, the government coming after people. What you said, Doug, is the question you asked Doug, which is interesting, or the Twitterer said, which was it's our land, it's not the guy. No longer do the American people see the federal government as their government. That is a danger in this democracy. And as Doug said, we are one spark away from something unpleasant happening, whether it's with this or another incident. And, the anger is out there. You just keep pouring into this.
And with the political insiders here, the conversation can continue on Twitter at FInsiders. We have a lot of tweets that people have responded to, and I know you guys are going to be talking tonight on Twitter, and then 10:30 Eastern on live.foxnews.com on our website. Doug, Pat, John,
Great.
Always good to see you. Everybody have a wonderful holiday.